Dean Bailey, and fellow members of the Augsburg community. Someone has tried to make it very sure that you would have a warm welcome this morning. So I have insisted that some of the fans be kept on so that we can temper this warmth just a little. I appreciate the introduction which Dean Bailey has given to me. I am surprised that he did not use the line which he usually uses, namely that the president is the leader of the flock and the dean is the crook in the staff. But you know, a shepherd uses a crook to pull wayward sheep back into line, and sometimes he's done that even with me, and I appreciate it. It's always a little difficult to know what to say to the student body and faculty at a convocation at the opening of school after you have told the students that they comprise the largest and the smartest and the best-looking student body in the history of the school. There are many tacks one could take. One could follow the line that Dean Bailey has indicated and talk about the changes which have taken place, which hopefully will affect us all in improving our experience together. If I had taken that line, then I would have had supplied for me the opening story, which a faculty member passed on to me yesterday. The cartoon showed Adam and Eve being expelled from the garden, and Adam turned to Eve and said, "My dear, it's going to be a year of transition." One could take another tack and string together some fatherly advice, telling the students to please stay off the grass. We've got so much new grass, we'd like to keep it that way. Tell the freshmen to keep their feet off the furniture in the college center, and assure the faculty that the parking problem will be taken care of. Usually our schedule calls for a chapel before the opening convocation, so one would be certainly under these circumstances allowed to preach a sermon. And if I were to do that, I think I would have taken my cue from the drama The Visit, which many of us saw last night, and expound on the text, "What doth it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" which is applicable to colleges as well as to individuals. But my purpose this morning is to strike the keynote of cooperation in discussing some ideas relating to you and to your college under the somewhat ambiguous title, "A College for Now and Then." A moment for a brief English lesson. Now and then are usually treated as adverbs. Now meaning at the present time, right at this moment. Then meaning at that time, soon after this, following next in order of time. I suggest that we use these adverbs as adjectives to describe two entities of extreme importance to you and to us all, namely, your generation. When I say that, I recognize that there is such a thing as a generation gap, and the educational establishment of which Augsburg serves as a representative in this instance. I need not remind you that across the nation this month, nearly 5 million of your peers in the late teens and early 20s, born in the years following World War II, have enrolled at over 2,000 colleges and universities in America. At first glance, the sheer size of this army setting out for lectures, libraries, and laboratories may seem to be its most apparent characteristic. Growth in mere numbers is often taken as the most important factor in higher education today. But the mass of students and the burgeoning colleges do not comprise the greatest significant development in higher education. Rather, the phenomenon that is by far the most important lies in the relationship between the character of the generation going to college and the character of the educational institutions receiving this generation. what appears to be on the surface a wonderful blend of compatible substances. Your generation seeking an education, and the or our educational enterprise offering an education, what more could you ask, is not a compatible blend at all, but a confrontation of two very different entities. And therein lies the excitement and the danger, the possible conflict and the potential for creative change. Yours has been aptly described as the now generation. For a host of reasons, too numerous to recount, you have been provided and subjected to more information, more experiences, more possibilities, more reality than any generation in history. The world for you is not something out there for which you ready yourself and into which, like St. George, to slay the dragon you go. The world, literally all the world, is about you. And through a variety of media and opportunities, you experience the world in its grandeur and its misery right now. No wonder that your generation considers itself eligible for all human experiences, from sex to skydiving to psychedelia now. The experiences of life are not laid out as sights on a map to be reached by marching forward down the highway of time. They are more like the pinball machines lined up along the walls of the penny arcade. And you move now and at will from one blinking light to another, from tilt to jackpot, with little or no effort whatsoever. Your attitudes are very apparent. Now, the good things of a materialistic society you figure ought to be yours. And your buying power indicates that you're out to get the whole bagful of modern conveniences now. If you marry, you don't wait until you can afford an electric refrigerator, an automatic washer, a TV, a stereo, and a vacuum cleaner. These constitute the essential equipment with which you start out right now, possibly after a honeymoon in the Bahamas. It's not when you have displayed maturity or demonstrated the faculty for good judgment that you acquire certain rights. They are yours to exercise now, simply because you are here now. One is tempted to overstatement, but I think you know what I'm driving at. Your thoughts are in the present. You assess everything in terms of how it affects you at the moment, not how it might affect your future or the future of your family or your children. In some future then, this is not uppermost. Now, right now, is important. So you were in college. Here in the establishment, the system, if you please, where now is seemingly not important of itself, but what it can mean then, when the grades are in, when the requirements are met, when the degree is conferred, when the job is secured, when success is achieved. Then appears to be the key word in education. When you choose a major, then. When you pass the examination, then. When you write a good paper, then. When you graduate, then. When you go for a graduate degree, then. When you get a PhD, then. Or when you get a good position, then. Now is submerged in import to then. To put it in philosophical categories, your generation is that of the existentialist. The then educational establishment is the domain of the essentialist. And Warner Bryan Martin of the Center for Research and Development in Higher Education in Berkeley declares this confrontation between the existentialist, the now generation, and the essentialist, the then establishment, to be the greatest single issue in education today. The essentialists, he says, and I quote, in education are formalists who reach back over time to the ancient Greeks. From Wittgenstein and Russell, Dewey and James, Hegel and Kant, Mill and Bentham, back through Locke, Descartes, Calvin, Aquinas, Augustine, to Aristotle and Plato, and behind them to timeless essences. Whether idealists emphasizing ideas and forces that transcend the particulars of human existence, or realists concentrating on men and affairs in and of this world, essentialists are concerned for that which goes beyond time and place, for that which is permanent, uniform, rational, sure. For some, the standard by which all else is judged is God. For others, nature or humanity. But never is it that solitary being, man. That's why in the educational establishment you hear a great deal about the truth. The existentialists, on the other hand, center their attention, I continue the quote, on man as man. Buber, Heidegger, Sartre, and Camus all see philosophy and education as efforts to give rational form to a vision that must be finally intensely personal. Only so can it be vital. And behind them are Kierkegaard, Pascal, Rousseau, Montaigne, Augustine. It is possible to have a foot in both camps. Tertullian, Socrates, and Job. It is interesting that he does not categorize Jesus. End of quote. To bring it down to our level, this generation is more concerned about exploring life, tasting its experiences, and finding its meaning now, than with the educator's concern for history, continuity, and goal achievement then. You are children of this space age, limitless space to be explored by rocket and jet. Our schools, for the most part, are products of the time age, produced by a long and painful evolutionary process. And sometimes they seem to be still horse and buggy. You, as Marshall McLuhan puts it, are the hunters, quick, mobile, tuned to the moment of fire, instead of to the more stationary concerns of the manufacturers and the growers, for whom time is of the essence. You are the generation of information seekers, which will wield greater power than the industrial producers, because the control of data will be of more significance than the control of the machine. One reason being that the desire for goods can be satiated, but the desire for information is one appetite that can never be fully satisfied. Life for the now generation is, in geometric terms, circular, surrounding one now with all its sights and sounds and smells, not linear, to be experienced in pedestrian fashion, day by day or mile by mile. Your music, so often misunderstood and unappreciated by the establishment, is likewise circular, not linear. The revolving record is a good symbol of this generation. Your music is repetitive, going round and round and round and round instead of being developmental, with a theme treated in a sequential fashion. The beat's what counts, not the melody, for life may be more a series of steady beats than a lovely tune. It is interesting to note how the mystics tend to appeal to the now generation rather than the philosophers, and how many of the mystics are treated seriously in the college curriculum. For you today, the identity syndrome is less to be feared than the success syndrome. One reason why you tend to reject the suburban values of your status-seeking parents. Meaning is more important than mastery. Yet the educational system is geared to mastery and very little to meaning. You are tuned to the cool media of an electronic age, capable of receiving easily an extraordinary amount and variety of signals. I watched with amazement my 16-year-old son a few Sundays ago, with a TV set switching back and forth between two football games, while he was listening to a radio switching back and forth between another football game and a baseball game. And the thing didn't seem to bother him at all. He had the whole thing under control. Possibly was reading a magazine at the same time. The establishment still insists on the hot media of talk and book, which you find so often to be tedious and boring, and lead some of your number to drop out of school because there seems to be more to be learned outside the establishment than in. In short, the now generation comes to education seeking the vital and is confronted with the formal. The former hungers and thirsts after integration. The latter emphasizes specialization. Now people want to be. Then people are looking for what you can become. In ethical terms, the now generation is concerned with relationships, very much in tune with the New Testament. The establishment with proposition. Or to use an analogy from church history, the now generation would find its kinship with the Eastern Orthodox development of Christianity, with its emphasis in its cathedrals on the circular dome of infinity above the congregation, and the presence in the mighty mosaic above of the reigning Christ, indicating his sovereignty over the here and now, transforming it into the eternal, rather than the Western Catholic development, with its long nave in its cathedrals, and its pilgrimage toward the eternal far on the way up there, symbolized by a high altar at the end. The presence is more important to you than the pilgrimage. Having tried to appreciate the now generation, however, I am compelled to remind you that the establishment is essential for your education. Form and structure are required, if for no other reason than to maintain a society in which freedom to experience existence is preserved. This the existentialist often overlooks. Chaos and anarchy would rob him of every meaningful experience except chaos and anarchy. Life is not stationary. It moves towards something. And what you believe that something to be shapes your present experience. Education is a process requiring a program with a purpose. Orderly movement through basics and fundamentals is imperative before a person has the ability and the tools to go it on his own. The danger is always that the process becomes deadening and stifling. But there is no substitute for the hard mastery of substance before exercising the principle. The tough labor of exercise, whether in voice, athletics, or writing, must precede performance and makes now meaningful in terms of what can be done then. Not all the experiences of life are possible now. The deepest come when life ripens and matures. So you see, there is no substitute for the discipline and hard work which the establishment demands. The demand arises from the fundamental realization that growth is necessary, a time process, a movement toward, a thematic development, a melody unfolding beyond the tedious beat. And what has all of this to do with you and Augsburg College? Perhaps no more than to say that we recognize the possibility of serious conflicts as you in your generation confront an institution still very much like all others in the establishment. Some serious struggles are bound to ensue as the college presses you to conform to its demands and you rebel against those pressures. But two factors are worthy of note. Neither your generation nor the establishment are fixed stereotypes. Change is possible. Change is necessary. And the values of life, both now and then, may become apparent to you, and the values and emphases of your generation may help to mold the educational system into a more relevant one. Therefore, it is so essential that we cooperate as a student generation and as a continuing college in the process of creating a better college. Many of you are pleased with the new buildings that we occupied at the beginning of the school year. Let me pay tribute to the fact that there were students seriously involved in the programming of those buildings. And many of the features are there because young men and women of your generation made a valuable contribution. I have reminded the faculty of the fact that one of the most important tasks before them this year is to carry out an academic study of the institution so that we can create for ourselves some kind of a blueprint for Augsburg in Decade 1, Century 2, the 70s. The basic objectives of this study are to shape a college which, one, will reflect the model of the free Christian college set forth in the recent Danforth study. Two, will strengthen the liberal arts to the point of achieving a Phi Beta Kappa chapter. Three, will prepare graduates for positions of greatest influence in society. And four, will meaningfully relate the college to its urban possibilities and responsibilities. In the course of this study, one of the ground rules to be followed is that students will be consulted and made a viable part of this process of change. I believe this must be so because the insistence upon vitality and relevance and meaning for the individual person comes from the humanness and the sensitivity of this now generation. It is the student who will keep education human. Another area in which we seek to establish full cooperation is in the development of our community life as a college. Here, this student generation and this educational establishment can be partners in a creative process. Actually, what we face at Augsburg today is a shift in our collegiate environment, as radical as a move from Gallshoot, North Dakota to downtown Minneapolis, from small town to big city. For 95 years, Augsburg has been Augsburg, a burg, a town, a fortress, if you please. Quite self-contained, small, comfortable, cozy, homogeneous, with a kind of psychological moat around the whole operation. Today we are no longer Augsburg, but if I may coin a new term, we are Augsurbia. And I have a right to that because across the river they're talking about the Communiversity. So we'll talk about Augsurbia. Not a little burg, but an urban community. And Augsburgia is beginning to feel all the problems of Urbia. All of them. Congestion, parking, pollution, all the waste paper and all the rest. Commuter inter-campus dichotomy, heterogeneity of race and religion, ghettos, automation and systematization, lawlessness, and poverty. All the problems of the modern city can be identified in embryonic form right on this campus. And if we cannot deal with them cooperatively and constructively in this microcosm, we will be singularly inept at dealing with them in the larger macrocosm. Students and faculty, staff and administration desperately need one another's cooperation to grapple with these problems so that the human dimension, so much the concern of your generation, shall not be lost, but realistically enhanced. Instead of rebellion and disgust, therefore, over what may seem to be the pedantic, useless, and wearisome chores of a college education, start to think and to discuss and to share how Augsburg can provide a more meaningful educational experience for your generation. And the sooner the quicker. I have told the faculty that Augsburg has passed the stage when it must seek to ape and imitate other colleges. The model for Augsburg tomorrow has yet to be created. Cooperate, I ask you, as colleagues in the creation of that model. The other saving factor in all of this must be that we are a Christian college. And this means a lot of things in this context. For one thing, the Christian message combines the now and the then. What you and I are now in this moment before God is of utmost significance. Not what you possess, or where you were born, or how good you are, or even what you might become. But at this moment, you and I stand a lost and condemned sinner, loved and redeemed by the grace of God, and that's what counts. But out of this moment of grace, and every moment of grace, comes the hope for then, when we shall grow up into the stature of the fullness of the Son of God, the one who was truly human. For now abides faith, hope, and love. Love which now is, but which we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Therefore, at this institution now is invested with the greatest of meanings. By the grace of God, I am what I am. And the then becomes fulfillment of all the glorious possibilities invested in those who love. For eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, nor hath entered into the heart of man the things that God hath prepared for those that love Him. Our claim to be a community of faith has further significance. It is in our moments of shared worship, confession, and faith. Chapel, if you please. In those moments, the gaps are all closed, generation and otherwise. In those moments, the individual and the system alike stand condemned, inadequate, ambiguous, but by virtue of divine love, capable of redemption and renewal. The confrontation of now and then becomes not conflict, but cooperation. When professor and student, president and janitor stand side by side on the level ground in need of the same grace of God. And that's what I mean by a college for now and then. A college where those who today fill its halls, who today fill its halls, will find acceptance and understanding. And where those who administer and teach will ask sincerely the cooperation and the insights of those whom they instruct, so that this moment in our common search for truth significance is found, but the future also becomes more nearly what we believe it can be, because we have worked together to make it so. May God grant us all a wonderful year. Thank you.